Let's move on. And the next participant from St. Petersburg, Alexandra Nenko, the chair of the lab for the quality of living, Institute of Design and Urban Research at the ITMO University. She is also working at crossroads between art, urban studies, IT. And now let's talk about mapping and city environment. Good day. I will follow not the case logic, but rather methodology. It's important to point out when talking about mapping and cultural planning, and I'm doing both, and also emotional mapping. So I'd like to share with you some insights. For me, these are also participatory practices, because the end users of the territory, local residents, visitors, could be engaged in this process. And actually, what it is about, to map local knowledge of the territory. This topic appeared in the 60s, thanks to the approach of UNESCO, and thanks to these issues, how to preserve the indigenous local cultures and communities, minorities, and to prevent the wiping out of their cultures. They came about with this paradigm of cultural mapping. It has been broadened over years and is widely used by different experts and communities to map all the senses and feelings of the places, narratives, everything which can be linked to culture, some special roots. I've been working with this topic for quite a long. 2017, I had a kind of a controversial experience on a festival where I was invited as a curator of a sociological part of the festival. We did mapping along with local residents. We did interviews with them, also with local experts. We did some interactive installations, and we got to know that the cultural mapping is not only about great histories or myths. It is also a means to identify dramatic processes, complicated process of deterioration and destroying of non-material and material values, which make up the identity. And the residents of that village, due to this advent of experts from big cities of Russia, due to this mapping process, they benefited from that. And this tool set, we did it with different means where people could map their houses, their favorite places, beach, their walking routes, or something which they are angry about, like abandoned areas. They marked some special places on the map, and it's difficult to take further actions without a proper interpretation of these marks. when mapping is done by institutions in terms of the active parts of the city environments, so local residents can also map senses which are important to them. The apologists of the cultural mapping, the shared non-material and material assets, something which is tangible, cultural institutions, graffitis, public art. Non-material values are difficult to map, and there are narratives, values, language, stories, feelings, which is usually gets revealed as top-down. It is a widespread system of mapping of the objects as assets. There can be cultural institutions, there can be districts with cultural heritage, cultural businesses, single art objects. This can be mapped very beautifully. Apart from the geolocation, and a strategy is being formed. If we have more cultural businesses connected to tourism, this is what we could develop. This is an important approach. We are doing this too. We are mapping businesses which can be related to creative industry and how they are localized in the city space. Here, the Vasilyevsky Island, it's important to understand where, how we form this creative landscape of the city, where the pockets are appearing. There are some areas which are especially attractive for creative businesses. Along with the open data from online maps, we can do this mapping and link this to spatial strategies. There is also bottom-up mapping, as mapping of city senses. These are two maps on the basis of the gray ring from our partner ML+. The experts from this lab have created these nice maps. For one of the industry spaces, they have mapped the context through the associations, through metaphors, like greenery, wilderness, dominant sightseeing places. These are emotions of these spatial features, and these features this is something to draw on by architects to saturate functionally this area. This is a sociological and anthropological approach. It is also possible to map senses, that which is void, which can be saturated in future. I have summarized what can be mapped at the city census. We could continue this list. If it comes to non-material values, we can work with narratives, with different routes. We can work with how this city space can be conveyed through art. we can designate some dominant places and the traces, which is also a very important anthropological term. Even garbage can be seen from this point of view. When we see, for instance, on a children's playground, some wine bottles laying around, this can be also a source for this mapping. We can incorporate this all into the design, and we should interact with nature and form the links between how we see the culture and how we see the nature. That the nature have a cultural dimension too. Some reflections based on this, the work of the MLA lab, how we could map some artifacts of this gray belt of buildings, which are also objects of cultural heritage, some attractions, some learning routes. There can be also bicycle routes and walking routes. These all are treasures. There are different tools for mapping. To the left on the slide, all these, both to the left and to the right, there are examples of the offline mapping. When we work here and now with maps, with paper, with stickers, with some sticks, we as a researcher can code some agendas through these tools. For instance, how we perceive emotionally a point of attraction. We can write down some interpretations. We can create also even 3D models to form a functional 3D row. We can work also online with the systems of public participation. We are also developing such systems, such survey systems. What it is good for, it focuses on surveys which are linked to special places. People can mark without any abstract ideas where they would like to see particular objects, like green places, art objects. They could also indicate routes they are using in their everyday life. They could add additional information, like whether they find it interesting, uncomfortable, or safe, or they can choose some functions or features they'd like to see in this space, or they do already see. And of course, we could also create such surveys based on different cultural aspects. And this is an example of a finalized map without how it is linked to culture. For instance, these red places, there are positive places, and blue places, there is something which needs change. These are senses which people link to these places. They link these places to their personal experience, whether positive or negative. Here, these red points, red dots, there are positive pockets. Green zones, there are open recreation spaces bound to positive experience gained through nature. We could also interpret negative places as well. Where are there problems to address? Actually, when we get such data, we can do further in-depth analysis, quality analysis, when we categorize some types of problems, or we summarize positive features. We can analyze semantics. When people write something in the comments, they use a particular language. For sociologists and anthropologists, it's important to see this local language, how these concepts are being viewed. It is important not only for the anthropological point of view, but it can be added to the spatial code of a place, and it can be added to the associations linked to a place. We can conduct also a quantitative analysis and make rankings of places, and spatial analysis too, so that we get to understand where most popular places, everyday or daily use places are located. I'd like to talk about emotional mapping. That is nothing new. It can be made worldwide. And now it's possible to work with the scale of the city or single territories. We can use online digital products, and we can also use emotional mapping. This one impression map has been developed in Kaliningrad. This tool, and this is a platform where we can indicate 6 types of emotions, and we get a representation of the city through the emotional spectrum. So as I've run out of time, I'd like to touch up on Kaliningrad. We have used this instrument in St. Petersburg and in other cities. A month ago, we had a first session to map the emotional experience connected to the Litovsky Wall, the street in Kaliningrad. We walked through this street and we focused on our emotions. We mapped them. And for me, the researcher, it is a picture which allows to advocate for the green elements and to show that they carry a very strong emotional experience through this perception. There are lots of feeling senses people get when they get in touch with this area. To the left are positive emotions, to the right are negative emotions. There is a spectrum to be analyzed. We have mapped only a piece of this area. Here there is a gate, here there is a lake. This is it looks quite abandoned, actually. And in future, when talking about the mapping of the whole green belt, we could also single out the emotional spectrum of the green belt, and it could be added as an additional layer to this map. I have already mentioned yesterday that maybe as one of the projects from our future platform for the cultural mapping in the northwest of Russia, I'm talking about the project about mapping of green spaces, ecosystem services. Those are values and senses and emotions which are conveyed through green zones. This is really relaxation and socialization for people. It's possible research from not Baltic region. It shows how these values are spread throughout the map. We have created it using this cultural mapping. This could be a good project to unite some cities. There's topic green belts of the cities. This is a very relevant issue now, and we as sociologists could bring to this discussion more information when using this tool of cultural planning and cultural mapping. That's all. But there is a minute to ask some questions or to comment on this.
So probably somebody wants to comment on the instruments, on the tools. Somebody got amazed with the potential or with the emotions in Kaliningrad. Does anybody want to comment on it? Green and blue. Blue is bad, green is good, but it doesn't mean actually anything. I mean, just the assigning some particular color. It's like positive and negative. Do you have any examples when mapping when you used mapping in some solutions for the urban space development? Yes, Ola mentioned one of the projects which involved the whole team. That was the project on our two little rivers, Ohta and Kervil, and the project was called Your City. And we, one of the slots was our mapping, and then it resulted in urban planning. And another project, we have been working together with the City Committee on Urban Planning within the framework of the competition peripheral resource. And we also did some mapping. And it was commissioned for the project, and it is an integral part of the project. And I think it's a kind of good instrument which is in high demand, and it is in demand not only for some smaller projects, but for some administrative projects. I guess that, just the activity of your team is a layer of the pre-project studies, and when you identify which spaces, which locations are in need of improvement, and a good benefit of this project. I have got my personal managerial experience of working with such projects. I think it's a very good combination of qualitative and quantitative information. Yeah, so in the advantages of online resource is the opportunity to interact with many more people than you can do it offline. And so just when you work online, of course, you can work with thousands of people. And then the quantity of data turns into the quality of data. And when you see the density of information, and when you can map it, then of course it improves the quality of the data. And I think it's a really very good combination, which certainly makes such kind of projects in high in demand. And so it's the participation. It is the information work. It's providing some consultations for the population, and it's kind of the next level. It's level up when people are actively involved and people share their opinions, and they can come up with some ideas, and they can state some problems, they can claim something. And that's really a very good combination of the survey and participation. And it's a good source, it's a good resource for recruiting. So when we conduct our sessions and when we talk to the people, we identify who can be invited to the sessions and who can be active in such works because they show.
Спасибо большое, спасибо, Саша.